So I mentioned to Sharon, geez, I've got this short little program I could put together, and you'll find out at the end what prompted me to put this together. But I think in half an hour I can get through this. So, an American story from the Mayflower to a Belfast sea captain's son, 1620 to 1895. So we'll start with the Mayflower. Among the passengers on the Mayflower were William Mullins, 48-year-old shoemaker from Dorking, County Surrey, England, his wife Alice, and their teenage children Priscilla and Joseph. The Mayflower landed, as you know, on Cape Cod in late 1620. William, his wife Alice, and son Joseph all died during the first winter at Plymouth, as did roughly half of the 102 people who came on the Mayflower. So it's 1621, spring, and Priscilla is a 17-year-old orphan. She was soon courted by Mayflower passenger John Alden on behalf of the colony's military commander, Miles Standish, whose first wife had also died that winter. Their story ended up being told many years later by Maine's own Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in his 1858 poem, The Courtship of Miles Standish. Now, it's hard for us to imagine how much of a rock star Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was in his lifetime. He died in the 1880s, I think, born just after 1800. V2. Oh, there it is. He was born in Portland. He was known internationally. I mean, he really was a rock star at a time when poets had a stature that's hard for us to imagine. Because most of the people that we've grown up with who were famous poets were songwriters, you know, like Bob Dylan. Not only was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow known internationally, children memorized his poems in school, and some of us probably did. He's best known, or best remembered, for his epic poems, The Courtship of Miles Standish, Evangeline, which is near and dear to my heart because it's about the Acadian expulsion from Nova Scotia, and my ancestors were among those people expelled. And the poem that we probably all remember, Listen, my children, and you shall hear with the midnight ride of Paul Revere. So he's quite the guy. And I'm related to him, I don't know, a dozen ways or something. Primarily because of this marriage. By 1623, Priscilla Mullins married John Alden, who had arrived on the Mayflower as a 22-year-old cooper. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was descendant of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins. In about 1660, Sarah Alden, who was the daughter of John and Priscilla, married Alexander Standish, the son of Miles Standish. By 1686, Mercy Standish, who was the daughter of a Standish and an Alden, married Caleb Sampson, the son of Henry Sampson, who had arrived on the Mayflower as a 16-year-old boy with his aunt and uncle, Edward and Martha Tilley, both of whom also died the first winter. You don't have to remember these names because I've got a chart coming. Okay. David Sampson was the son of Caleb Sampson and Mercy Standish, was born at Duxbury, Mass. in 1686, where he spent his life as a farmer. In 1712, he married Mary Chapin of Marshfield, Mass., who was not a Mayflower descendant. Their daughter, Eleanor Sampson, was born at Duxbury in 1732. She married Joseph Farnham of Marshfield, and it should say Mass, not Maine. In about 1765, the Farnham family moved from Marshfield, Mass. to Boothbay, Maine, where Joseph was listed as a head of household in the first census of the United States in 1790. John Farnham, son of Joseph and Eleanor, was born about 1760 in Marshfield and came with his parents to Boothbay in about 1765. He then married a Boothbay native, Abigail Plummer. Mary Farnham, who was the daughter of John and Abigail, born at Boothbay in 1819. In 1843, she married a Boothbay native, Weston Smalley, Isaac Weston Smalley. He was an 8th generation descendant of Edward Small, who immigrated from Biddeford, that's the correct spelling, in Devonshire on the southwest coast of England, to Piscataqua, which is now Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in 1639. Mary Farnham and Isaac Weston Smalley were first cousins once removed, both being descendants of Mayflower passenger Henry Sampson. And part of this just illustrates how many Mayflower descendants came from Massachusetts to Maine. And they did this over the span of roughly 200 years. It's just astounding. Isaac Weston Smalley was a descendant of Joshua Smalley, who served for 6 months during 1776 as a private in the Massachusetts Militia Company during the Revolutionary War. He was stationed at Truro on Cape Cod for defense of the seacoast. Finally, Isaac Weston Smalley was also a descendant of Stephen Hopkins and his children, Constance Hopkins and Giles Hopkins, all of whom were passengers on the Mayflower. And by this time, my head is going in circles. So what I do when that happens is I do a chart. So everybody in red is a Mayflower pattern. I don't know if the red shows up along the top. Henry Sampson, William Mullins, his wife Alice, Priscilla Mullins, John Alden, Miles Standish, Stephen Hopkins, and I didn't have red there, but I should have Constance Hopkins and Giles Hopkins. And you can see how they all coalesced to that couple, whose descendants are obviously descended from all those Mayflower passengers. And this is pretty common. You get many marriages of cousins, sometimes as close as first cousins, but often a little more distant than that. And if you pick this through, you can figure out the cousins. Oops. And I am also a descendant of Henry Sampson, William and Alice Mullins, Priscilla Mullins, John Alden, Miles Standish, Stephen Hopkins, and Constance Hopkins. But that's not where the story is going, thankfully. By 1846, Isaac Weston Smalley and Mary Farnham had moved to Belfast, where they had 10 children born between 1846 and 1864. Isaac was a seaman, was listed as a head of household at Belfast in the 1850 census. And for those of us who do genealogy, the 1850 census is the census because it names everybody in the household by their first name, which didn't happen prior to that. The first son of Isaac Smalley and Mary Farnham was his first child, was a son, Castinus Morrill Smalley, born at Belfast, 22nd of January, 1846. In August of 1862, Castinus, who was 16 years old, probably lied about his age, enlisted as a private in Company D of the newly formed 19th Maine Infantry Regiment. The 19th Maine was at the Battle of Gettysburg and was present at the surrender of Confederate General Robert E. Lee and his army at Appomattox Courthouse on the 9th of April, 1865, which effectively ended the Civil War. And there were many men from Belfast and the surrounding towns who were members of the 19th Maine, as was my third great-grandfather. On the 22nd of November, 1873, 27-year-old Castinus Morrill Smalley, by then a master mariner, married at Belfast 26-year-old Mary Susan Redmond, daughter of Francis Redmond and Rebecca Murch of Brooksville, which is why I know about all these people and care about them. Rebecca is the sister of my third great-grandfather. Castinus and Susan had 7 children, all born at Belfast. In 1884, Castinus received an invalid pension based on his Civil War service. He died in Belfast in 1890 at the age of 44. That is his gravestone in Grove Cemetery. It's hard to read, but it is Castinus Smalley.
And in the cemetery cleaning project.
This is his obituary. Cassinus, love the spelling too, M. Smalley of Belfast, died suddenly at his home on Tuesday morning of rheumatism of the chest, which might have been tuberculosis. Mr. Smalley was about 46 years old. He had worked in the shipyard of McDonald and Brown until about 10 days ago, when he was obliged to leave owing to illness. Tuesday morning, he ate his breakfast as usual and died soon thereafter. Mr. Smalley was the oldest son of the late I.W. Smalley and an excellent citizen. During the War of the Rebellion, he was a member of Company D of the 19th Maine and was a good soldier. He was discharged for ill health and was a pensioner. He was also a member of Thomas H. Marshall Post, Grand Army of the Republic, which is the Belfast Post. He leaves a wife and 5 children. So this story so far, I've got multiple Mayflower passengers leading to a descendant who fought in the Revolutionary War, leading to Cassinus Smalley, who fought in the Civil War. In 1891, his widow received a widow's pension. She was recorded as a head of household in the 1900 census, living on High Street, and again in the 1910 census, living on Union Street. Mary Susan Redmond Smalley died at Belfast the 16th of May, 1918, at the age of 69 from arteriosclerosis and anemia. And that is her gravestone. These are some, I haven't actually walked to find these yet. They're somewhere in the old section under all the big maple trees, which is why they look like this. This is Mary Susan's obituary. Widow of the late Cassinus M. Smalley, passed away early Thursday morning at her home, number 4 Selman Street. I suspect Selman numbered up from High Street. My grandparents lived at the upper end of Selman Street some years after this. She had been in ill health for some time, but failed rapidly in the past few weeks. She was born at Brooksville, the daughter of the late Frank and Rebecca Murch Redmond. When a girl of about 19 years, she came to Belfast, which has since been her home. Her husband died about 28 years ago, leaving her with a family of small children. She was a woman of strong Christian principles, thoughtful of others' comforts, and in the home life, all that a devoted mother could be. She made a wide circle of friends who loved and respected her for her many womanly qualities. Part of the value of newspapers.com and various other sites is you can find this stuff. And these can be genealogical gold mines. You see here how much information you can glean from this if you didn't know who her parents were, for example, or where she was born.
Dana, I'm very glad that you were not named Cassinus, because apparently there's a lot of Cassinus in this family line. If it's found, but
Oh.
this is the junior.
This is the junior.
There's a third.
Yeah.
That's Cassinus Moral.
Cassinus Moral, right, right, yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, the one that gets me is what's up here? Anthony Coombs. There are at least 5 in a row on Islesboro, let alone the related Coombeses on Vinyl Haven. Yeah, they're just. And now we get to the reason that I did all of this to begin with. The first child of Cassinus Smalley and Mary Susan Redmond was Frank Smalley, born at Belfast, 22nd of May, 1875. He died the 31st of January, 1895. That is his gravestone. And this is his obituary. This is where I started. Frank Smalley of this city died suddenly, January the 31st, at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. He was an inmate of the Perkins Institute for the Blind in South Boston. January 25th was taken with pneumonia. He was removed to the hospital where he was getting along quite well until pleurisy set in and resided fatally in a short time. The deceased was the son of Mary and the late Castinus Smalley. And when a small boy attended the public schools, where he proved a good scholar. Soon his eyesight began to fail, and he was sent away for treatment, but without avail. He soon became totally blind. For a few years past, he has been an inmate of the Perkins Institute, which still exists today, where he has shown considerable ability. The remains were brought to Belfast for interment, arriving here on Monday forenoon's train. His schoolmates at the Perkins Institute sent a very handsome floral cross. His age was 19 years. Sad story, but one that I could find. And I could trace his ancestry through 250 years of American history, which was pretty amazing. So, oh. Hmm? So the Redmonds who were, the Redmond was Murch, was originally from Brooksville. Her parents were in Castine, and they are my fourth great grandparents. So that's the connection. Someone else had a question. Mm-hmm. Castinus Smalley was the master mariner in the census, the one that was in the Civil War. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's a PowerPoint. I can send it to you as a, or did you want to print out? Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you.